The sky had turned black as ink by the time Amelia Edwards realized she would never make it back to Aspen before the storm hit. And the first fat drops of rain were already soaking through her cotton dress when she spotted the cabin's dim light flickering through the pines. She urged her mare forward, though the animal needed little encouragement to seek shelter from the rapidly deteriorating weather. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the very ground beneath them, and lightning split the darkening Colorado sky in jagged white lines. Amelia had been foolish to venture so far from town alone. She knew that now, but the Henderson family had needed those medical supplies desperately. And Dr. Walsh had been 3 counties away tending to a difficult birth. As the town's only other person with any medical knowledge, gleaned from years of helping her late father in his practice back in Boston, she had felt duty-bound to make the delivery herself. The cabin grew larger as she approached, a sturdy structure of hewn logs with smoke rising from its stone chimney. Relief flooded through her as she dismounted, her boots squelching in the mud that had formed almost instantly on the trail. She led her horse toward a small stable attached to the side of the building, grateful to find it dry and well-maintained. The door to the cabin swung open before she could knock, revealing a tall man silhouetted against the warm glow of lamplight. He was broad-shouldered and lean, with dark hair that hung just past his collar and several days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. His eyes, a striking shade of blue-gray, swept over her with concern. "Good God, madam, get yourself inside before you catch your death," he said, his voice a deep rumble that somehow cut through the roar of the storm. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Your horse will be fine where she is. I will tend to her once you are settled." Amelia did not need to be told twice. She hurried past him into the warmth of the cabin, immediately aware of how bedraggled she must look. Water dripped from her hair, which had come loose from its pins, and her dress clung uncomfortably to her skin. She stood near the door, not wanting to track mud and water across the clean wooden floor. The man closed the door against the howling wind and turned to face her properly. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps 28 or 30 to her own 24 years. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way that made something flutter unexpectedly in her chest. "Name is Ryder Donovan," he said, moving past her to a large trunk near the stone fireplace. "Let me get you something dry to wear. You will make yourself sick standing there in those wet things." "I am Amelia Edwards," she managed through chattering teeth. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Donovan. I was returning to Aspen from the Henderson place when the storm came upon me faster than I anticipated." "No apology needed," Ryder said, pulling out what looked like a clean linen shirt and a pair of woolen trousers. "Weather in these mountains can turn on a dime, especially this time of year. September can be unpredictable." He handed her the clothes, then pointed to a curtained-off area in the corner. "You can change behind there. I will step outside and check on your mare." Before she could protest that he would get soaked himself, he had already grabbed a long, oilskin coat from a peg near the door and disappeared into the storm. Amelia wasted no time, hurrying behind the curtain to peel off her wet garments. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons and laces, numb from cold, but eventually she managed to strip down to her chemise and drawers, which were mercifully only damp rather than soaked through. She pulled on Ryder's shirt, which hung almost to her knees, and rolled up the sleeves several times before they were manageable. The trousers required a piece of rope to stay up, but they were warm and dry, and that was all that mattered. She emerged from behind the curtain just as Ryder returned, water streaming from his coat. He hung it on the peg and turned to her, and something flickered in his eyes as he took in her appearance in his clothes. It was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Your mare is settled," he said, moving to the fireplace to add another log. "Fine animal, quarter horse." "Yes," Amelia said, gathering her wet hair and attempting to wring some of the water from it. "Her name is Maple. She belonged to my father." "Was he a horseman?" "He was a doctor in Boston. He kept Maple for his house calls." She paused, the familiar ache of loss tightening her chest. "He passed away 2 years ago, influenza." Ryder's expression softened with genuine sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss. Is that why you came west, to start fresh, in a manner of speaking?" "My mother remarried rather quickly after father's death, to a man I did not particularly care for. I had some money saved and a desire for independence, so I came to Colorado. Aspen needed a school teacher, and I needed a purpose." She looked around the cabin, noting its simple but well-kept interior. A large bed occupied one corner, neatly made with a thick quilt. A rough-hewn table and 2 chairs sat near the window, and shelves lined one wall, holding books, supplies, and what looked like surveying equipment. "Have you lived here long, Mr. Donovan? Call me Ryder, please." "And yes, about 5 years now. I have a claim up the mountain working a silver vein. It is not much, but it is honest work and the solitude suits me." "You mine alone?" "Mostly. I have a partner who comes up from town now and then, helps me with the heavy work. But I prefer to keep to myself for the most part." He gestured to the table. "You must be hungry. I have stew from supper and there is fresh bread." Amelia's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and she felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I confess I am famished. I left town this morning without breaking my fast, and I gave my provisions to the Hendersons. Their larder was nearly bare." Ryder's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Tom Henderson is a proud man, sometimes too proud for his own good. His youngest has been sick, I take it." "Yes, a terrible cough. I brought medicine and some other supplies." His wife, Sarah, seemed grateful, though I could see the worry in her eyes. "They have 5 children, and Tom lost most of his herd to rustlers last month." "I heard about that," Ryder said, ladling stew into a bowl and setting it on the table along with a thick slice of bread. "Sit, eat. We can talk while you have your supper." Amelia settled into one of the chairs, and the first spoonful of stew nearly made her moan with pleasure. It was simple fare, beef and vegetables in a rich broth, but it was hot and filling, exactly what she needed. Ryder sat across from her with a cup of coffee, watching her with those steady blue-gray eyes. "You said you have medical knowledge," he said after a while. "Did your father teach you?" She nodded, swallowing a mouthful of bread. "From the time I was old enough to understand, he would take me with him on calls. He believed that everyone should know basic medicine, especially women, since we are often the ones called upon to tend the sick and injured. After my mother made it clear she had no interest in his work, he taught me everything he could. I can set bones, stitch wounds, deliver babies, compound medicines. I am not a licensed physician, of course, but I know enough to help when Dr. Walsh is unavailable." "That is a rare skill," Ryder said, genuine respect in his voice. "Aspen is fortunate to have you. I try to be useful. Teaching the children is rewarding, but being able to help in other ways gives me a sense of purpose." She finished her stew and sat back, feeling warmth spread through her body. "Thank you for the meal and for the shelter. I shudder to think what would have happened if I had not seen your cabin." "These mountains can be unforgiving," Ryder agreed. "You would have found shelter eventually, but you might have caught pneumonia in the process. The storm looks like it will last through the night. You are welcome to stay here, of course. I will take the floor and you can have the bed." "I could not possibly put you out of your own bed," Amelia protested. "I will be perfectly fine on the floor with some blankets." "I will not hear of it." You are my guest, and I was raised to be a gentleman, even if I do live alone in the mountains like a hermit." There was a hint of humor in his voice that made Amelia smile. "Very well, if you insist, but only because I suspect you are too stubborn to be argued with." A wise assessment. They talked as the storm raged outside, the conversation flowing more easily than Amelia would have expected with a stranger. Ryder told her about his life before Colorado, growing up on a ranch in Wyoming, losing his parents to a typhoid outbreak when he was 19, trying to make a go of ranching on his own before realizing he did not have the capital to compete with the larger operations. He had drifted for a few years, working as a ranch hand, a trail guide, even a lawman for a brief stint in a small town near Denver. "Why did you leave law work?" Amelia asked, genuinely curious. His expression darkened. "I saw too much corruption, too many men using a badge as an excuse to abuse power. I was young and idealistic, thought I could make a difference, but the men I worked for were more interested in lining their pockets than serving justice. When I refused to look the other way during a particularly ugly incident involving a Chinese family who owned a laundry, I was given a choice to quit or be run out of town. I quit and came here, where the only person I have to answer to is myself." Amelia felt a surge of respect for this man who had sacrificed his position rather than compromise his principles. That must have been difficult. It was the right thing to do, not always easy but right. He stood and moved to the window, peering out at the rain that continued to pound against the glass. "Storm is still fierce. You made it here just in time." She joined him at the window, aware of how small the cabin suddenly felt with both of them standing so close. She could smell wood smoke and soap and something else, something distinctly masculine that made her pulse quicken. It had been so long since she had been alone with a man, and never one who affected her quite like this. "I was lucky," she said quietly, "or perhaps it was Providence." Ryder turned to look at her, and she was struck by the intensity in his gaze. "Do you believe in Providence, Miss Edwards?" "Amelia, please." "And yes, I think I do. I believe things happen for a reason, even if we cannot always understand that reason at the time." "Then perhaps Providence brought you to my door tonight." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something Amelia could not quite name but felt deep in her bones. She was acutely aware of every detail. The way his wet hair curled slightly at his temples, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the strong column of his throat above the collar of his shirt. "Perhaps it did," she whispered. Ryder reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to step away, and gently tucked a strand of her still damp hair behind her ear. His fingers were warm against her skin, calloused from hard work but surprisingly gentle. "You should rest. Tomorrow will be soon enough to head back to town." Amelia nodded, not trusting her voice. She moved away from him, toward the bed, and he busied himself laying out blankets on the floor near the fireplace. She slipped beneath the thick quilt, still wearing his clothes, and watched as he arranged his makeshift bed. The mattress smelled like him, clean and woodsy, and she found it oddly comforting. "Good night, Amelia," Ryder said, extinguishing the lamp and leaving only the firelight to illuminate the cabin. "Good night, Ryder." She lay awake for a long time, listening to the storm and the sound of his breathing, feeling something shift and settle in her chest. She had come to Colorado seeking independence and purpose, but she had not expected to find this, whatever this was. The feeling was both thrilling and terrifying, and as she finally drifted off to sleep, she wondered what the morning would bring. Dawn broke clear and bright, the storm having passed in the night. Amelia woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon, momentarily disoriented until she remembered where she was. She sat up to find Ryder at the stove, fully dressed and looking far too alert for someone who had spent the night on the floor. "Good morning," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," Amelia admitted, swinging her legs out of bed. Her dress hung near the fire and she was relieved to see it was dry. "Thank you again for your hospitality." "It was my pleasure. Breakfast is almost ready, and then I will ride with you back to Aspen. Cannot have you getting lost again." "That is not necessary. I am sure I can find my way in the daylight." Ryder turned from the stove, his expression firm. "I am sure you can, but I would feel better knowing you made it safely. Besides, I need to pick up some supplies, and it has been a while since I was in town." Amelia suspected he was making excuses, but found she did not mind. The idea of spending more time with him was far more appealing than it should have been, given that they had only just met. She changed back into her dress behind the curtain, mourning the loss of the comfortable trousers, and joined him at the table for a breakfast of bacon, eggs, and more of that excellent bread. They set out within the hour, Ryder on a powerful bay gelding he called Ranger. The morning air was crisp and clean, washed fresh by the storm, and the mountains looked magnificent in the clear light. They rode side by side where the trail allowed, talking about everything and nothing, learning the small details that make up a person's life. Amelia discovered that Ryder loved to read, that the books on his shelves were well-worn favorites he returned to again and again. He admitted that he sometimes talked to Ranger when the solitude grew too heavy, and that he had a weakness for lemon cake that he indulged whenever he could convince the baker in Aspen to make one. Ryder learned that Amelia had a mischievous sense of humor beneath her proper exterior, that she missed the ocean despite loving the mountains, and that she dreamed of one day opening a proper school with real textbooks and supplies, instead of making do with the limited resources available in the one-room schoolhouse she currently used. By the time Aspen came into view, nestled in the valley with the mountains rising majestically behind it, Amelia realized with a pang that she did not want the ride to end. The town was small but growing, its main street lined with businesses that catered to the miners and ranchers who made up the bulk of the population. The school where Amelia taught sat at the far end of town, a modest wooden building with a bell tower and a small yard. "Where do you live?" Ryder asked as they rode down the main street, drawing curious glances from the townspeople who knew Amelia but had likely never seen her in the company of the reclusive miner. "I rent a room above the Mercantile from Mrs. Patterson. It is small but comfortable, and the price is reasonable." She gestured toward the building in question, a two-story structure with a neatly painted sign advertising dry goods and sundries. They stopped in front of the Mercantile, and Ryder dismounted, then moved to help Amelia down. His hands spanned her waist easily, and he lifted her as though she weighed nothing at all. For a moment, they stood very close, her hands resting on his shoulders, his on her waist, and Amelia felt that same electric charge she had experienced the night before. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "I do not know what I would have done without your kindness. I am glad I could help." His thumbs moved almost unconsciously against her waist, a small gesture that sent heat coursing through her. "Amelia, I know we have only just met, but I would like to see you again. Would that be acceptable to you?" Her heart soared. "I would like that very much. I come to town most Saturdays for supplies. Perhaps I could call on you then. We could have lunch or take a walk if the weather permits." "That would be lovely." She smiled up at him, aware that they were creating quite a spectacle for anyone watching, but unable to bring herself to care. Ryder released her reluctantly, stepping back to put a respectable distance between them. "Saturday, then. I will look forward to it." "As will I." Amelia watched him ride away toward the general store, her heart feeling lighter than it had in months. She turned to enter the mercantile and nearly collided with Mrs. Patterson, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an incurable curiosity about everyone's business. "My dear girl, where have you been? When you did not come home last night, I was worried sick. And who was that handsome man? I have never seen you with anyone before." Amelia laughed, linking her arm through Mrs. Patterson's. "It is quite a story. Let me tell you over tea." The days until Saturday seemed to crawl by. Amelia threw herself into her teaching with renewed energy, but her mind kept drifting to Ryder, to the warmth of his smile and the gentle strength in his hands. She found herself standing at her window on Friday evening, looking out toward the mountains where his cabin lay hidden among the pines, wondering if he was thinking of her too. Saturday dawned bright and clear, and Amelia took extra care with her appearance, choosing her best day dress, a soft blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She pinned her dark hair into an elegant knot at the nape of her neck and even dabbed a bit of rose water at her wrists and throat. Mrs. Patterson noticed, of course. "You look lovely, dear. Mr. Donovan is a lucky man." "We are only having lunch, Mrs. Patterson. Do not read too much into it." "Of course, dear. And I am the Queen of England." The older woman's eyes twinkled with amusement. Ryder arrived at noon precisely, looking scrubbed and handsome in clean trousers and a dark blue shirt that matched his eyes. He held his hat in his hands and looked almost nervous, which Amelia found endearing. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. You look very well yourself." They walked to the hotel restaurant, one of the nicer establishments in town, and settled at a table by the window. Over plates of roasted chicken and vegetables, they continued the conversation they had begun on the trail, delving deeper into hopes and dreams, fears and regrets. Ryder spoke of his desire to eventually expand his mining operation, perhaps hire a few men and make a real go of it. "I have found a good vein, and I believe there is more if I can dig deeper, but it is slow work alone." "Why not take on a partner?" Amelia asked. "Trust is not easy for me. I have been burned before, had men I thought were friends turn on me when money was involved. My current partner, Jack Sullivan, is reliable, but he has his own claim to work. He helps me when he can, but I cannot ask him to commit full time." "That must be lonely, working up there all by yourself." "It is," he admitted, "but it is also peaceful. No one to answer to, no one to disappoint." He met her eyes. "Or at least it was peaceful. Now I find myself thinking that perhaps a little less solitude would not be such a bad thing." Amelia's breath caught. "And what changed your mind? You did." The simple honesty of his words moved her deeply. She reached across the table and he took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I have been thinking about you too," she confessed. "More than is probably proper for such a short acquaintance. Propriety is overrated." He smiled, and she felt herself falling a little bit more. They spent the afternoon walking through town and along the creek that ran through the valley. Ryder bought her an ice cream from the confectioner, and they sat on a bench near the church, talking and laughing like old friends. When the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ryder walked her back to the mercantile. "May I see you again next week?" he asked, still holding her hand. "Yes, please." He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent shivers down her spine. "Until next Saturday, then." Amelia floated up to her room, feeling as though her feet barely touched the stairs. She had never felt like this before, had never experienced this heady combination of excitement and contentment, desire and peace. It was intoxicating. The weeks that followed fell into a pattern. Ryder came to town every Saturday, and they spent the day together, exploring the area around Aspen, having meals, talking for hours about anything and everything. He told her about his work in the mine, the challenges and the small victories. She told him about her students, like young Tommy Carson, who struggled with his letters but excelled at mathematics, or Sally Brennan, who wrote the most imaginative stories. As September gave way to October, the aspen trees that gave the town its name turned golden, creating a breathtaking display against the evergreen pines and the blue sky. Ryder took Amelia on a picnic to a meadow where the aspens grew thick, and they lay on a blanket watching the leaves shimmer in the breeze like thousands of gold coins. "I have never seen anything so beautiful," Amelia breathed. Ryder turned to look at her, his eyes soft. "Neither have I." She met his gaze and saw her own feelings reflected there, the growing affection that had deepened into something much stronger. When he leaned toward her, she met him halfway, and their first kiss was sweet and tender, filled with promise. "I am falling in love with you," Ryder whispered against her lips. "I am falling in love with you too," Amelia replied, her heart full to bursting. They courted properly after that, though their feelings were anything but proper in their intensity. Ryder began to talk about the future, about expanding his cabin into a real house, about the possibility of bringing Amelia up to see his claim and the land around it. In early November, just as the first snows began to dust the high peaks, Ryder asked Amelia to marry him. They were in his cabin, where Amelia had become a frequent visitor on Sundays after church. She had helped him add curtains to the windows and a rug before the fireplace, small touches that made the space feel more like a home. He went down on one knee before her, holding a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. "I know it has not been long, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you, Amelia Edwards. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, Ryder Donovan. Yes, I will marry you." They were wed in December, in the small church in Aspen with half the town in attendance. Amelia wore a dress of ivory silk that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew, and Ryder looked impossibly handsome in a new suit. Dr. Walsh gave Amelia away, having become something of a father figure to her in the months since she had arrived in Colorado. Their wedding night was spent in the cabin that would now be their home. Ryder had spent weeks preparing for her arrival, expanding the structure to include a proper kitchen and a sitting area, even installing glass windows where before there had been only shutters. He carried her over the threshold, and Amelia felt a surge of joy so intense it almost hurt. "Welcome home, Mrs. Donovan," Ryder murmured, setting her gently on her feet. "It is perfect," she said, looking around at the space he had worked so hard to make ready for her. "You are perfect. Far from perfect, but I will spend every day trying to be the husband you deserve." Their love that night was tender and passionate, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Amelia had never felt so cherished, so completely loved, and as she fell asleep in Ryder's arms, she sent up a silent prayer of thanks to whatever providence had sent that storm to drive her to his door. The winter was long and cold, but Amelia did not mind. She had resigned from her teaching position, much to the disappointment of her students, but she promised to return in the spring. For now, she wanted to focus on building her life with Ryder, on learning the rhythms of their days together. She discovered that married life suited her. Ryder worked hard in the mine, often coming home exhausted and covered in rock dust, but he always had a smile for her, always made time to talk and to hold her. Amelia kept the cabin warm and welcoming, cooked hearty meals, and read aloud to him in the evenings from the books they both loved. In February, Amelia realized she was with child. The knowledge filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She had helped deliver babies, had seen the risks involved, but she trusted in her own knowledge and in Ryder's steady presence. When she told him, Ryder swept her into his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure delight. "A baby! Amelia, we are going to have a baby. You are happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the answer obvious. Happy does not begin to cover it. I am over the moon. I am walking on air. He set her down carefully as though she might break. "We need to get you to Dr. Walsh, make sure everything is as it should be." "I am fine, Ryder, truly." "But yes, we can see the doctor when we go to town next." Dr. Walsh confirmed what Amelia already knew and pronounced her healthy and strong. "The baby should come in early September if my calculations are correct. You could not ask for a better time, weather-wise." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Amelia's morning sickness was mild and passed quickly, and she bloomed with health, her skin glowing and her eyes bright. Ryder became even more protective, insisting she rest more, not lift anything heavy, stay warm and well fed. She found his attentiveness both touching and occasionally exasperating. "I am having a baby, not dying of consumption," she told him one day when he tried to stop her from carrying a basket of laundry. "I am perfectly capable of doing my chores." "I know, but I worry. You are the most precious thing in the world to me, and now there are two of you to protect." How could she argue with that? Spring came late to the mountains, but when it finally arrived, it was glorious. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows and the creeks ran high with snowmelt. Ryder's claim was producing well, and he hired 2 reliable men to help with the digging, allowing him to spend more time at home with Amelia. In June, Amelia received a letter from her mother in Boston. It was the first communication she had received from her in over a year, and she opened it with trepidation. Her mother wrote that she had left her second husband, finally finding the courage to walk away from a man who had proven himself to be cruel and controlling. She was living with Amelia's aunt in Providence and wanted to know if there might be a place for her in Colorado, if Amelia could find it in her heart to forgive her for choosing a husband over her daughter. Amelia showed the letter to Ryder, tears streaming down her face. "I do not know what to do. Part of me wants to tell her to stay away, that she made her choice, but she is still my mother." Ryder pulled her close, his hand rubbing soothing circles on her back. "What does your heart tell you? That everyone deserves a second chance? That I would want someone to forgive me if our positions were reversed? Then write to her. Tell her she is welcome here. We have the room, and perhaps having your mother nearby when the baby comes would be a comfort to you." Amelia looked up at him, love swelling in her chest. "You are a good man, Ryder Donovan. I am a man who loves his wife and wants her to be happy." Amelia wrote back immediately, extending an invitation for her mother to come to Colorado. She arrived in July, a thin, careworn woman who looked far older than her 48 years. But when she saw Amelia, rounded with child and glowing with happiness, she burst into tears and held her daughter as though she would never let go. "I am so sorry," Margaret Edwards said over and over. "I am so very sorry for everything. It is all right, Mother. You are here now, and that is what matters." Margaret settled into the cabin, taking over many of the household chores and giving Amelia time to rest as her pregnancy advanced. She and Ryder were wary of each other at first, but Margaret's genuine remorse and her clear adoration of her daughter eventually won him over. By August, they were conversing easily, and Margaret had even learned to make Ryder's favorite lemon cake. On a warm September evening, just as Dr. Walsh had predicted, Amelia's labor began. Ryder wanted to ride for the doctor immediately, but Amelia stopped him. "There is time. First babies take a while. Besides, Mother has delivered babies before, and I know what to expect." We will send for Dr. Walsh if we need him, but I think we will be fine." Ryder looked terrified but trusted her judgment. He stayed by her side through the long hours of labor, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring words of encouragement. Margaret moved about efficiently, preparing clean linens and hot water, her capable hands steady. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Amelia gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He came into the world with a lusty cry that made both his parents laugh through their tears. "A son," Ryder breathed, his voice thick with emotion as he held the tiny bundle. "We have a son." "What shall we name him?" Amelia asked, exhausted but elated. They had discussed names, but nothing had felt quite right. Now, looking at his small, perfect face, Amelia knew. "Thomas, after my father, Thomas Donovan." "Thomas," Ryder repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is perfect." He placed the baby in Amelia's arms and kissed her forehead. "You are amazing. Thank you for this gift for our beautiful son." Thomas proved to be a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's dark hair and his father's blue-gray eyes. Amelia loved him with a fierceness that sometimes frightened her, and Ryder proved to be a devoted father, often staying up late with Thomas when he was fussy so Amelia could sleep. Margaret was invaluable during those early weeks, cooking and cleaning and helping with the baby so Amelia could recover her strength. "I may not have been the mother you needed before," she told Amelia one day, "but I hope I can be the grandmother Thomas deserves. You already are, Mother." Life settled into a new rhythm. Ryder continued to work the mine, which was producing enough silver that they were able to put money aside for the future. Amelia cared for Thomas and managed the household, occasionally helping Dr. Walsh when he needed an extra pair of skilled hands for a difficult case. Margaret, who had feared she might not be welcome long-term, was persuaded to stay permanently, and Ryder built a small addition to the cabin to give her a private room. The months turned into years. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic toddler who loved to follow his father around, mimicking everything Ryder did. When Thomas was 2, Amelia became pregnant again, and this time she delivered a daughter they named Rose, after the wildflowers that had bloomed in the meadow where Ryder first kissed her. Rose was different from her brother, quieter and more contemplative, with Amelia's delicate features and a smile that could light up the darkest day. Thomas adored his little sister, and Amelia often found them playing together, his boisterous energy tempered by her gentle nature. Ryder's mining operation had grown to employ nearly a dozen men, and he was known throughout the county as a fair and honest employer. The cabin had expanded into a substantial house, with multiple bedrooms, a large kitchen, and even a parlor with real furniture that Amelia had ordered from Denver. When Thomas was 5 and Rose was 3, Amelia discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was more difficult, leaving her tired and nauseous for months. Ryder insisted she rest, taking on more of the childcare duties with Margaret's help. Their third child, a boy they named James, arrived in the spring, smaller than his siblings but healthy and strong. Amelia recovered slowly from the birth, and Dr. Walsh advised her that another pregnancy might be dangerous. Amelia and Ryder talked late into the night and decided that their family was complete. 3 beautiful children, a thriving business, a home filled with love. It was more than either of them had ever dreamed possible. The years continued to pass in a blur of activity and joy. Thomas grew tall and strong, showing an aptitude for working with his hands that made Ryder proud. He began helping at the mine when he was 12, and by 15 he was talking about becoming an engineer, designing better and safer ways to extract ore. Rose proved to have her mother's compassionate nature and her grandmother's practical skills. She announced at age 10 that she wanted to be a doctor, a pronouncement that was met with skepticism from some in town but wholehearted support from her family. Amelia began teaching her everything she knew, and Dr. Walsh, now elderly but still practicing, took her on as an informal apprentice. James was the wild card, creative and impulsive, with a gift for music that manifested when he was barely old enough to walk. Ryder bought him a harmonica, then a guitar, and the boy taught himself to play, filling the house with melodies that made everyone smile. Margaret lived to see all three of her grandchildren grown, passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. Her funeral was well attended, a testament to how beloved she had become in the community. Amelia mourned her deeply, but was grateful for the years they had been given to rebuild their relationship. By the time Amelia and Ryder reached their 40th year of marriage, they had become pillars of the community. The mine had made them comfortably wealthy, though they lived simply, preferring to invest in their children's futures and in charitable causes around Aspen. Thomas had indeed become an engineer, working for a large mining company in Denver, but visiting often with his wife and 2 children. Rose had defied expectations and earned her medical degree from a progressive school in the East, returning to Aspen to take over Dr. Walsh's practice when he finally retired. James had married a singer he met in Colorado Springs, and together they toured the country, bringing joy through their music, but always returning home for Christmas. Ryder's hair had gone silver, and lines creased his face, but to Amelia he was still the handsome man who had opened his door to a stranger in a storm. Her own dark hair had threads of gray, and her hands bore the marks of a life of hard work, but Ryder still looked at her as though she was the most beautiful woman in the world. They sat on the porch of their home one September evening, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. It was nearly 42 years to the day since that storm had brought Amelia to Ryder's cabin, changing both their lives forever. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked, taking her hand as they rocked gently in their chairs. "Staying here, marrying a simple miner instead of going back east where you could have had an easier life." Amelia turned to look at him, her eyes soft with love. "Regret? How could I regret the best decision I ever made?" "You gave me everything, Ryder. A home, a family, a love I never thought possible. My only regret is that we do not have more years ahead of us." "We have had a good run," Ryder said, his voice rough with emotion. "Better than most. 3 wonderful children, 8 grandchildren so far, a life filled with love and laughter. I could not ask for more. Neither could I." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, they could hear Rose moving about in the kitchen, preparing supper. She had moved back home a few years ago, wanting to be close to her parents as they aged, and Amelia was grateful for her presence. "I love you, Amelia Donovan," Ryder said, as he had said countless times over the decades. "I have loved you from the moment you stood dripping in my cabin, looking like a half-drowned kitten but still managing to be the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I love you too, Ryder. More than words can say. You have been my haven, my home, my heart." He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles as he had that first Saturday in Aspen so many years ago. The gesture was as tender now as it had been then, a symbol of the enduring love that had sustained them through all the joys and challenges of their life together. As the last light faded from the sky and the night settled around them, Amelia reflected on the twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. A storm, a cabin, a cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle heart. It had been the beginning of everything, the foundation upon which she had built a life richer and fuller than any she had imagined in her wildest dreams. The years that followed were gentle ones. Ryder and Amelia grew old together, their love only deepening with time. They delighted in their grandchildren, who visited often, filling the house with noise and laughter. Thomas brought his children to learn about mining and engineering. Rose's daughter showed an early interest in medicine, following her mother on calls around Aspen. James's son inherited his father's musical talent and his grandfather's blue-gray eyes. When Ryder was 72, he decided to retire from active involvement in the mine, turning over daily operations to a manager he trusted. He wanted to spend his remaining years with Amelia, traveling a little, visiting their children, simply enjoying the fruits of their labor. They took a trip to San Francisco, something Amelia had always wanted to do, and stood on the beach watching the waves roll in. Amelia, who had grown up near the ocean in Boston, felt tears prick her eyes at the familiar sound and smell of the sea. "I had forgotten how much I missed this," she said, leaning against Ryder's solid warmth. "We can come back anytime you want," he promised. "Or we could even move to the coast if that would make you happy." She shook her head. "No, my home is in Colorado with you. This is just a visit, a chance to remember where I came from, but my heart belongs in the mountains." They returned to Aspen refreshed, and even more appreciative of the life they had built. Ryder's health remained good for several more years, though he moved a bit slower and tired more easily. Amelia developed arthritis in her hands, making some tasks difficult, but she remained active and engaged with the community. On their 50th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that half the county attended. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, and a cake so enormous it fed everyone with slices to spare. Amelia and Ryder danced together as they had at their wedding, moving slowly to a waltz played by James on his guitar, and everyone watching felt the power of their love, a love that had endured for half a century and showed no signs of fading. 50 years, Amelia marveled as they swayed together. "Where did the time go?" "Into building a life worth living," Ryder replied. "Into raising children and loving each other and making every day count. No regrets, not a single one. You, only that we will not have 50 more." Ryder pulled her closer, resting his cheek against her hair. "Then we will make the most of whatever time we have left." And they did. They spent their days quietly, reading together, talking about everything and nothing, reminiscing about the life they had shared. Ryder still helped out at the mine occasionally, unable to stay away completely, and Amelia still assisted Rose with difficult cases, her knowledge and experience invaluable. When Ryder was 78, he suffered a heart attack while working in the garden. Amelia was with him, holding his hand as Rose worked frantically to save him. He survived, but he was weakened, and both Rose and the new young doctor in town agreed that his heart had been damaged. "How long?" Ryder asked Rose directly, his hand still gripping Amelia's. Rose's eyes filled with tears, but she answered honestly. "Months, maybe a year if you are careful. Rest, no stress, a careful diet." Ryder nodded, accepting the news with the same calm strength he had shown throughout his life. "Then I will make the most of it." Those final months were bittersweet. Ryder could no longer do the things he loved, could no longer ride Ranger's successor up to the high meadows or work with his hands. But he could sit with Amelia, could hold her hand and tell her he loved her, could watch the sun set over the mountains he had called home for more than 50 years. Their children visited often, along with their grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. The house was rarely quiet, and Ryder seemed to gather strength from having his family around him. He told stories of the old days, of building the mine and the house, of the early years of their marriage when they had been young, and everything had seemed possible. "You gave me the best life," he told Amelia one evening as they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill. "I was content before I met you, but I was not truly living. You taught me how to love, how to be part of something bigger than myself. You made me whole." Amelia's tears fell freely. "We made each other whole. I was running from my past when that storm brought me to you, and you gave me a future. You gave me everything." "Promise me something," Ryder said, his voice weak but urgent. "Promise me you will not mourn too long. You have years left, and I want you to live them fully. Spend time with our children, watch our grandchildren grow, find joy in every day. Can you promise me that?" "I promise," Amelia whispered, knowing she had to honor his wish even though the thought of life without him was unbearable. "But only if you promise that you will wait for me, wherever you are going. Promise that when my time comes, you will be there." "I promise. I will be waiting, and we will have eternity together." Ryder passed away peacefully on a crisp October morning, surrounded by his family. He opened his eyes one last time, looked at Amelia with all the love of their 54 years together, and whispered, "My haven, my home, my heart." Then he closed his eyes and was gone. The funeral was the largest Aspen had ever seen. People came from all over the state to pay their respects to a man who had been known for his integrity, his generosity, and his unwavering devotion to his family. Amelia bore it with quiet dignity, comforted by her children and the certainty that Ryder was at peace. The months after his death were the hardest of Amelia's life. She had lost her father, her mother, friends and acquaintances, but nothing compared to losing the man who had been her partner, her lover, her best friend for more than half a century. The house felt empty despite Rose's presence, and Amelia often found herself talking to Ryder as though he were still there, telling him about her day, asking his opinion on matters large and small. But she had made him a promise, and Amelia Edwards Donovan was a woman who kept her word. She forced herself to engage with life, to visit with her grandchildren, to help Rose at the clinic when she was needed. Slowly, painfully, she found a new rhythm, a way of being that honored Ryder's memory while still moving forward. She lived for another 6 years, years filled with the love of family and the satisfaction of seeing her children and grandchildren thrive. Thomas's engineering innovations were being used in mines across the West. Rose had become one of the most respected doctors in Colorado, known for her skill and her compassion. James's music had brought him national recognition, and his children were following in his footsteps. Amelia's greatest joy came from her great-grandchildren, a new generation who would carry the legacy of love and strength forward. She told them stories of their great-grandfather, of the cowboy who had opened his cabin to a stranger in a storm and changed the course of 2 lives. On a September evening, 60 years to the day since that fateful storm, Amelia felt a familiar pain in her chest. She was 84 years old, and she knew what the pain meant. She was not afraid. Instead, she felt a sense of peace, of completion. Rose was with her, as were Thomas and James, who had rushed to Aspen when they heard their mother was failing. They surrounded her bed, holding her hands, telling her they loved her. "I see him," Amelia whispered, her eyes focusing on something beyond the room. "I see your father. He is waiting for me just as he promised." "Go to him, Mother," Rose said through her tears. "We will be all right. We will take care of each other, just as you taught us." Amelia smiled, her face peaceful and young again in the soft lamplight. "Tell the children, tell the grandchildren, tell everyone who will listen. Tell them that love endures. Tell them that a single moment of kindness, a single act of opening your door and your heart can change everything. Tell them our story. We will, Mother. We promise. Amelia closed her eyes, and in her mind she was no longer in the bed but standing in a meadow filled with golden aspens, the leaves shimmering like coins in the breeze. Ryder stood waiting for her, looking as he had the day they married, young and strong and handsome, his blue-gray eyes full of love. "I kept my promise," she said, walking toward him. "I lived fully and now I am here. I know you did." He opened his arms and she walked into them, home at last. "Welcome back, my love. Welcome home." As Amelia Edwards Donovan drew her last breath, surrounded by the children she and Ryder had raised and loved, she wore a smile of perfect contentment. Her story, which had begun with a storm and a stranger's kindness, ended as all the best stories do, with love triumphant, promises kept, and the certain knowledge that some bonds are strong enough to transcend even death. The people of Aspen mourned the loss of one of their most beloved citizens, but they also celebrated a life well lived. At Amelia's funeral, held in the same church where she and Ryder had married 6 decades earlier, Rose stood to speak. "My mother once told me that she believed in Providence," Rose said, her voice strong despite her tears. "She believed that things happen for a reason, even if we cannot always understand that reason at the time. A storm drove her to my father's cabin 60 years ago, and that storm changed not just their lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. Their love was a force of nature, as powerful and enduring as the mountains that surrounded them. It shaped our family, our community, and countless individuals who were fortunate enough to know them. They are together now, in whatever lies beyond this life, and their love story will live on in all of us." The words resonated with everyone present, and more than one person left the church determined to love more openly, to extend kindness to strangers, to believe that Providence might have a plan even when life seemed chaotic and uncertain. Amelia was buried next to Ryder on a hillside overlooking the valley, with a view of the mountains they had both loved. Their headstone, a simple granite marker, bore an inscription chosen by their children, Ryder Donovan, 1844–1922, Amelia Edwards Donovan, 1846–1930, Haven, home, heart together forever years past, and the Donovan family continued to grow and flourish. Thomas's descendants became engineers and builders, carrying on his legacy of innovation. Rose's children and grandchildren followed her into medicine, several becoming doctors and nurses who served their communities with skill and compassion. James's musical talent flowed through the generations, producing performers and teachers who brought beauty into the world. The old Donovan house, which had begun as a simple cabin, was maintained by the family as a kind of shrine to Ryder and Amelia's love. Generations of Donovans returned there for reunions and celebrations, walking through rooms that still echoed with laughter and love, sitting on the porch where Ryder and Amelia had spent so many evenings watching the sunset. The mine, too, remained in family hands, operated by Thomas's descendants, who never forgot the principles of fairness and integrity that Ryder had instilled. It continued to produce silver for decades, providing employment and stability for the people of Aspen. But more than the physical legacy of property and prosperity, Ryder and Amelia left behind something far more valuable: a template for how to love completely, how to build a life on a foundation of kindness and trust, how to weather storms both literal and metaphorical with grace and strength. Their story became part of the folklore of Aspen, told and retold until it achieved an almost mythical quality. Young lovers would hike to the meadow where Ryder had first kissed Amelia, now known as Donovan Meadow, and make promises to each other beneath the golden aspens. Newlyweds would visit the graves on the hillside, asking for blessings on their own marriages. The original cabin, which had been carefully preserved within the larger house, became something of a pilgrimage site. The bed where they had slept, the fireplace where Amelia had warmed herself on that stormy night, the table where they had shared their first meal together, all of it maintained exactly as it had been. In 1975, nearly a century after that fateful September storm, the Colorado Historical Society designated the Donovan House as a historical landmark. A great-great-granddaughter of Ryder and Amelia, herself named Amelia, gave a speech at the dedication ceremony. "My great-great-grandparents taught us that love is not just a feeling but a choice, renewed every day," she said. They chose each other not once but thousands of times, in moments big and small, through challenges and triumphs. Their love was not perfect, but it was real and true and enduring. In preserving this place, we preserve not just a building but a reminder that the best things in life come from opening our hearts to possibility, from extending kindness to strangers, from believing that even the darkest storm can lead us to exactly where we need to be. The Donovan legacy continued into the 21st century. Doctors and engineers, teachers and musicians, builders and artists, all carried forward the values that Ryder and Amelia had exemplified. They told their children the story, and their children told theirs, a chain of love and memory stretching across the generations. And sometimes, on September evenings when the aspens turned gold and the air held the promise of coming storms, people claimed they could see two figures walking hand in hand through Donovan Meadow. A tall man with blue-gray eyes and a dark-haired woman with a smile that could light up the darkest day, forever young, forever in love, forever together. The story of Ryder and Amelia Donovan proved that some loves truly are eternal, that kindness shown to a stranger can ripple through time in ways we cannot imagine, and that sometimes, when we are lost in the storm, Providence guides us exactly where we need to be. Their haven became their home, and their hearts beat as one from that first stormy night until the end of their days and beyond. In the end, theirs was a love story for the ages, simple in its beginning but profound in its impact. A cowboy and a schoolteacher, brought together by chance or fate or providence, who chose each other every day for more than 50 years, and built a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story reminded everyone who heard it that the greatest adventures often begin with a single act of kindness, that true love can weather any storm, and that opening your door and your heart to another person is the bravest and most rewarding thing anyone can do. And so the legend lived on, passed down through the years, a testament to the enduring power of love, the importance of kindness, and the truth that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them. Ryder Donovan opened his cabin door to a stranger caught in a storm, and in doing so, he found his haven, his home, and his heart. Amelia Edwards sought shelter from the tempest and discovered a love that would sustain her through all the storms of life. Together, they proved that happily ever after is not just a fairy tale ending but something that can be built, day by day, choice by choice, through hard work, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to love. Their story was, in the end, exactly what a love story should be. Honest, heartfelt, and full of hope for anyone who believes that true love is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth cherishing every single day.